It's June 25th, a Wednesday. I'm Jim Csek with NowMedia. The headlines for today: Trump is now Big Daddy. NATO ponies up. Mark Carney a little bit flustered. Ceasefire is holding. Flashcards for hard drugs to cut or not to cut. And sage market advice that does not age well. All that and a lot more on The Really Big Show. With me, Iain Burns, our managing editor, all the way in Ottawa, where we kind of do news a little bit different here. This is more national, international, and then some BC and local news sometimes. And, we add in our thoughts as well. So you're not going to get this on most of the mainstream media, but you will get it here on NowMedia with myself, Jim Csek, and Iain Burns.
We like to have a laugh, don't we? That's the difference.
A little bit of sarcasm, a little bit of fun, and a little bit of common sense, all doled in there with what's going on in the world. And this one was interesting here, and the ceasefire here, and this is. We'll start off with this, and this is Donald Trump responding to a question here.
I'd like to see a deal with Russia. As you know, Vladimir called me up. He said, "Can I help you with Iran?" I said, "No, I don't need help with Iran. I need help with you." And I hope we're going to be getting a deal done with Russia.
There you go. So there you go. At least Vladimir called him up and said, "Hey, you need some help?" I like the response there. And that was off Joe Rogan.
Quite cheeky of him.
Yeah. And then we're going to start with some of the fun stuff here. And this is the Big Daddy remark here. And this is Mark Rutte, the head of NATO here.
We've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. They fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes, then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
The media lost its mind with that one, right? Because it's so, are all the NATO nations your children? And just like they kind of lost their minds and then lost focus of what's really going on. But here's actually, let's be serious for a couple seconds. Here's Mark Rutte here introducing Donald Trump here at the NATO summit here. So let's play this clip here. It's a little bit longer.
I appreciate doing it. Perhaps you want to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me first, before I go to spending, I just want to recognize your decisive action on Iran.
Thank you.
You are a man of strength, but you're also a man of peace. And the fact that you are now also successful in getting this ceasefire done between Israel and Iran, I really want to commend you for it.
Thank you.
And I think this is important for the whole world. Then on spending, it's absolutely true. I want to state here, without President Trump, this would not have happened. In 3 stages. When you became president in 2016, 2017, you forced Europeans and Canadians to pay more. At this moment, the result of that phase is $1 trillion extra aggregate defense spending by the Canadians and the Europeans. Then came phase 2, when you became president in January last year. Phase 2 is that all the countries not yet on 2% have now committed to the 2%. This is the old goal from Wales in 2014. 7 were not on 2%. Some were saying somewhere in the 2030s. Now this year, all of them, including Canada, including Italy, including Belgium, they have all now committed to the 2%. And now comes the big splash. Today, we will decide to go to 5%. We have to keep ourselves safe from our adversaries, but also because it is fair to equalize with the United States. With this 5%, the Europeans and the Canadians will equalize their defense spending with the United States. So this is not about American taxpayers paying more. This is about Europeans, Canadians paying more. And again, this would not have happened. I'm really saying this here. And some people might criticize me, but then when I speak with them, they all say, yes, you're right. This would not have happened if you would not have been elected in 2016 and re-elected last year and back into office in January. So I want to thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Big fan of Donald Trump there, and he says that people say differently in public, but in private they agree. So interesting.
Well, that's been the case for a while with Trump, hasn't it? That's been true. That they don't dare say what they really think in public, but they're very nice to him. That's obviously why he posts screenshots of text and stuff nowadays, because he's obviously sick of that. He's sick of being told one thing in private and then being insulted in public. So now he just publishes their private correspondence. But this guy, he's the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, this fella. And he's known as the Trump Whisperer. That's kind of like that's his nickname, because he just, as you can see, he just flatters Trump in a very successful way. He's got that. He's figured out from, I guess, American politics that if you just flatter him endlessly, he will be nice to you, and your life will be easier. So that's what Rutte has pulled off here. I mean, the cheek of the Americans, though, because they don't spend 5% on defense. I don't think they even spend 3.5%, do they? They spend around about that much. And people forget this outside of America, but the US military is like a welfare program. In fact, arguably, I would say about half of their expenditure, if not more, is just another form of welfare for unemployable people, basically. And it spreads money around, and all the senators and all the congressmen vote on pork barrel bills to try and get pointless military contracts for their states, just to get, it's all about money. It's all about recycling cash and bribing people, basically. So it's a bit strange that the Americans have rabbited on about this for so long, and they're not even going to hit that, and then they feel under no pressure to do it. So what it seems to represent to me is just, look, NATO was kind of, from the get-go, it was kind of an instrument of the American empire, but it was very subtle, and it was less formalized. And I feel like now with Trump, because he obviously doesn't do subtlety very well, that's kind of what he is. He represents the true face of American power, I feel. And now, as a consequence, NATO is very clearly just the American empire, and it's just there for all to see. There's nothing hidden about it anymore. The countries in NATO, including Canada and the Netherlands and all the rest of them, are American vassals or suzerains, whatever term you prefer to use. They are subordinated to the United States, and Exhibit A is this.
And then one of the things, though, there's a clear demonstration that that bombing in Iran was a clear demonstration of the American military might, and it's obvious fact that it led to the ceasefire, and it was like it just demonstrated strength, whether or not, and they, that American military machine is obviously the strongest in the world, and that part is obvious. And is there excesses and like a lot of pork there, and the defense contractors that make a lot of money off of it? Absolutely right, and it's sad in that respect, but it's clear why that like NATO, with what happened with Russia and Ukraine, why they kind of bend a knee now to the American military might, because they can't do it themselves.
Well, they're not willing to do it themselves was probably closer to the truth.
Yeah.
They didn't want to. I mean, just look at Canada. Look at Justin Trudeau. It almost seemed like a day didn't pass that he didn't come out and start talking about Ukraine and how they were fighting against the Russians. But he completely refused to spend any money on Canada's defense. He just refused. He just outright said, no, I'm not going to do it, no matter what. Even though the pressure kept on building on him, he just kept saying no. And I think the same is true Germany is obviously like a psychologically crippled nation. It's not even really a proper country. It's such a bizarre place with a civilization that was destroyed by Hitler and hasn't really recovered. So it kind of makes sense that the Germans would drag their feet and be unsure about it. I mean, it's less obvious why the French and the Brits and all the rest of those countries, the victors of the Second World War, why they would just sit around and not do anything. But that's the truth is, look, 5% of GDP is massive. That's not 5% of your budget. You have to remember, that's 5% of what you tax.
Big number.
And then
it's a big
spend.
Number. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably closer to like a third or something of expenditure. It's an enormous amount of money, and the European countries and Canada just weren't willing to spend that. They had other plans for that money. So that's more the reality of it. It's not that they couldn't. I mean, the Europeans, if they put their heads together, could easily slap the Russians. Russia's not an impressive military force, as it's shown. It can't even beat Ukraine, a tin pot corrupt country with a dying population. It can't even beat them. Russia's not scary except for its nuclear weapons. So the Europeans could have knocked Russia out with one eye open if they really put their minds to it. The question is, why did they not want to? And I think the answer is politics. Basically, they wanted to spend that money on other things.
Well, you did see that Mark Rutte did include Canada in that. He didn't say Canada is part of the European Union, as like maybe Mark Carney wants to believe. But so Canada says, and this is from Laurie Goldstein, that will spend 5% of its GDP by 2035. But they have said that they're going to do 2% by 2026, right? So here's Mark Carney being asked on this question here on the 5%, though. And here's his answer, which is not, again, it's in Mark Carney fashion, his answer.
Thank you. My other question, I'll try and be fast, is
that's question 4.
About the commitment to hundreds of billions of dollars cumulatively you've made today. The parliamentary budget officer told us that implies higher deficits unless you either raise taxes or cut major projects, social spending. So do you agree with him? And if so, how high a net debt to GDP ratio are you willing to run?
We will grow this economy. We'll grow this economy. We'll balance our operational budget in 3 years. That's our commitment. But we will also invest in this country, including in our defense industry. Thank you. This country being Canada, not Netherlands.
If Trump's the daddy, what is Carney? Is Carney the teenage boy? He can't even speak. And I know a lot of people might look at this as being like quite cruel and needlessly sort of abusive and personal, but it tells you about his mind. He can't speak. He can't even articulate what's in his head, and he's in charge of this country. I mean, I consider that to be quite a serious issue. That's a serious problem.
You would have thought he'd be ready for this question after making that commitment, because he's sitting around in the room with all the other, the boys in the room, and the boys and girls in the room, like he's part of this new European club that he wants to be part of. And, he's like, yep, we're in, because, everybody's like ponying up and they're saying they're going to spend 5%. So, Canada's there, like, are you going to in? And of course we're in. And then you'd think he'd be prepared for that question. You'd think he'd actually be prepared for that question, but he obviously was not. Maybe he's assuming that the Canadian media is not going to be that way. And you could even see Anita Anand kind of rocking back and forth there, right? Like squirming and seeing if she can actually just slide out of frame there.
Well, one question I was waiting for, because he mentioned Stephen Fuhr, a lot of this was about procurement and the importance of, buying from friends and allies, like, in other words, the Europeans, and a dig at the Americans. And yet the question that was conspicuously not asked by our glorious elite journalists there is, why are you allowing British Columbia to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, on equipment bought directly from the primary enemy of Canada and Western civilization? Any answer to that, Mark? He still hasn't answered that question, and he's not being asked it.
To be fair, it hasn't been asked, and that's again.
Well, if he was truly responsible, he would answer it without needing to be prompted. But he's talking about how important it is to, like, and not just him. This whole NATO conference, it's all been about being closer on defense procurement and using each other's military industrial bases. So to use the Germans or to use the French, and then excluding the Americans in some cases. That's what it's all kind of about, really. And that that 1.5%, because it's really not 5% on defense, it's 3.5%. That's the figure. And I feel like I've already kind of played into this lie, and it's easy to do this. This is why PR people, press officers, get some quite good money sometimes, because they know how to spin lies and put lies into the mouths of journalists, and they almost don't even realize that they're repeating a lie. But the lie here is 5% on defense. Not true. It's 3.5% on defense. 1.5% percentage points of that 5% is just anything you like, basically. It's just whatever you want. Build a bridge and call it defense. So it's actually 3.5%. And I've in my rant, I've forgotten what I was even saying there. But I would say about Europe and the EU, he was asked that question. They found time to ask him that question, but not about the BC ferries. But they said, and on a surprisingly direct question, just said, do you want to join the EU? And he just said, no, and then waffled for about 10 minutes after that.
We got another little clip here. One of the reporters asked about what he's going to cut to make these. So let's play this clip here first of all.
It's Steve Chase for the Globe and Mail. I want to ask you to what extent you have social license, to what extent you think you have public support for what defense experts are saying would be the largest increase in defense spending since the Second World War. We're talking 7% increases a year to reach that 50 billion number. It's going to crowd out other investments. It's going to crowd out requests for healthcare transfer increases. So to what extent do you think you have public support for this?
So the overall context of the net increase in defense spending is much less than the headline from 2 to 5. We absolutely need to establish the political and social, to use your social license, the public support for that. It needs to be, as I indicated in my remarks, including my remarks in that room. First and foremost, we are protecting Canadians. We are protecting Canadians against new threats. I wish we didn't have to, but we do have to, and it is our core responsibility as government. And those threats, we see them, the evolving threat environment, most clearly in the Arctic, but it's also through the Arctic into Canada. We're focused on the outcome, the result, protecting Canadians. We're driven by that, not by, with all due respect, sitting in the NATO building, by NATO accountants.
Is the goal there to say as many words as possible and not really say anything at all?
I mean, if that is the goal, then he needs a new goal. But it's actually kind of torture. It's painful to sit through and listen to him speak. And he's made a couple of jokes about that now and then when he's in a self-effacing mood, as he sometimes is. And he's made a bit of, he's been a bit banterous about it in the past. But it does seem intentional because obviously he's so boring. He's so dull. And he's such a bad speaker, such a bad composer of English prose that it's almost like an advantage because nobody's listening to him. It's like, why on earth would you bother wasting your life listening to this man?
You kind of zone out there as he's answering because you know you're not getting an answer. You're just like, okay, so what is the answer? But let's turn our focus back to what's going on in NATO. NATO, obviously, a lot of the focus was on the United States of America and the bombing in Iran, and then the ceasefire and all that stuff. And then, like some of the mainstream media in the United States leaked a report or had some whistleblower show it, stuff like that. And then they were challenging the effectiveness of the bombing. And what's really kind of curious is that they don't tie two and two together, just like they do a bombing run, next thing you know, they have a ceasefire. So obviously it's successful. Otherwise, why would the Iranians agree to a ceasefire if it was like none? But here's Pete Hegseth answering some questions from the reporters.
Yeah. There's a reason the president calls out fake news for what it is. These pilots, these refuelers, these fighters, these air defenders, the skill and the courage it took to go into enemy territory flying 36 hours on behalf of the American people and the world to take out a nuclear program is beyond what anyone in this audience can fathom. And then the instinct of CNN, the instinct of the New York Times is to try to find a way to spin it for their own political reasons to try to hurt President Trump or our country. They don't care what the troops think. They don't care what the world thinks. They want to spin it to try to make him look bad based on a leak. Of course, we've all seen plenty of leakers. And what do leakers do? They have agendas. And what do? Do they share the whole information or just the part that they want to introduce? And when they introduce that preliminary report that's deemed to be a low assessment, you know what a low assessment means? Low confidence in the data in that report. And why is there low confidence? Because all of the evidence of what was just bombed by 12 30,000-pound bombs is buried under a mountain, devastated and obliterated. So if you want to make an assessment of what happened at Fordo, you better get a big shovel and go really deep, because Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. And somebody somewhere is trying to leak something to say, oh, with low confidence, we think maybe it's moderate. Those that drop the bombs precisely in the right place know exactly what happened when that exploded. And you know who else knows? Iran. That's why they came to the table right away, because their nuclear capabilities have been set back beyond what they thought were possible because of the courage of a commander-in-chief who led our troops, despite what the fake news wants to say.
I think he's been watching David Eby press conferences, just absolutely full of non sequiturs. Nobody in the press that I've seen has said anything unpleasant about the pilots that did this. That's not the story. Shut up. That's not the story. What kind of foolish garbage is this Fox News host trying to thrust down the throats of the planet? It's just like straight away, it's like right from the get-go, I just feel like he's insulted everybody listening to him. Nobody has criticized the pilots. It's not about that. It's about how much damage has really been done to Iran's nuclear program. It's about the enriched uranium and where that is now. It's about whether or not they can repackage it and deploy it again. And then he says, oh, well, Iran obviously knows. That's why they agreed to a ceasefire. There was already a ceasefire. Iran didn't break the ceasefire. Israel did. Iran didn't want this fight. I mean, again, it's like these political figures, these like masters of the universe, just stand there behind a podium and insult people just 24/7. I don't know how the press can accept that, the people in the room there. It's just appalling garbage. And the thing is, Trump does this kind of thing all the time, but at least Trump's funny. It's okay with Trump, or to an extent it is, because Trump's like a showman. He's like the greatest showman of our era, and he's funny. Whereas this guy is just like, he's like Fox News B team. Like, go away.
Let's play this clip here from Donald Trump.
For too long, one ally, the United States, carried too much of the burden of that commitment. And that changes today. President Trump, dear Donald, you made this change possible. Your leadership on this has already produced $1 trillion in extra spending from European allies since 2016. And the decisions today will produce trillions more for our common defense to make us stronger and fairer by equalizing spending between America and America's allies.
I can tell you right now, the boys at Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and Palantir are all standing up and cheering. Because
big time. Well, and
this is,
I'm sure they'll bring in their good friends, the consultants, to decide how to spend this money as well.
This is big money for the war machine. And then we do have one more clip here, I think, on this, and then I think we'll leave this alone here for now. Let's play this last clip with Trump at the podium here.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah.
A question on Spain. Are you satisfied with today?
Oh, I think Spain's terrible what they've done. No, I do. They're the only country that won't pay the full up. They want to stay at 2%. I think it's terrible. And, you know, they're doing very well. The economy is very well. And that economy could be blown right out of the water with something bad happening. You know, Spain is the only country that... Are you from Spain?
Yeah.
Good, congratulations. You're the only country that is not paying. I don't know what the problem is. I think it's too bad. So we'll make it up. You know what we're going to do? We're negotiating with Spain on a trade deal. We're going to make them pay twice as much. And I'm actually serious about that. We're going to make Spain... I like Spain. I have so many people from Spain that it's a great place and they're great people. But Spain is the only country out of all of the countries that refuses to pay. And, you know, so they want a little bit of a free ride. But
there you go.
It's funny, Slovakia is another one that's also like, Slovakia, the leader of Slovakia is like openly mused about just leaving NATO. He says, I don't think it's worth the value. It's not like good value for money. But I would say, like, look at a map of NATO countries, and there's quite a few like big absences there. Austria is another one, Switzerland, and Ireland. Ireland is like, since Ireland won independence from the British, has just been the master of freeloading. No country in the world, in the history of the world, has ever been a freeloader as much as Ireland, and as successfully as Ireland, even to the point where they're also a tax haven. So they kind of like take money away from other jurisdictions.
I would say
but my advice to Spain would be just leave. Do what Ireland does. Just leave.
Yeah, they're the furthest away from all the stuff too. But and Switzerland obviously has enjoyed that status for a long, long time as well.
But they're protected by the West. Switzerland, they tell this stupid lie to themselves about being like neutral. It's like, oh, not our problem, guys. They're protected by the West, obviously, just
Well,
like
that's
Ireland is. It's
that's where all
just
the money
it's a
is.
complete fantasy that they're allowed to continue with.
And then this, I think this last bit here, Trump says U.S.-Iran meeting will happen next week, and obviously that's going to have to do with trade and maybe the lifting of sanctions and that against Iran, which would be a big win for Iran. With what happened with Syria as well. Syria was celebrating when it got a lot of its sanctions lifted, and then I listened to somebody else talking about the Abraham Accord and saying would Iran join the Abraham Accords? I don't know. I mean, they said possibly in the future.
That would be an earthquake felt around the world if that happened.
It would. But at least they're talking about stuff like that as opposed to, yeah, let's just hope the ceasefire holds and that there's, peace in that area, and then they can only work on that. And then obviously there's a couple more wars to go. Let's move on to some other stuff, though. Here's Holly Doan, reached out with a Freedom of Information ask, and she did a Canadian FOI request for records, and what she got back was a lot of black ink. How much black ink does the federal government waste on blacking everything out? And she was asking for contributions to the Liberal Party by any BDC employee or executive, including the chair. And that's what she got back. Why would that be secretive information?
And also, why have they misspelled the word color at the top of that? I've seen that so many times from the federal government where they misspell words. What the hell is wrong with these people? But I mean, on the ink question, imagine if you had to print out loads of copies of this. That's a lot of ink. That's quite a lot of money. I mean, and I'm not entirely joking, because ink is very expensive.
So again, it's ironic. Freedom of information. Freedom of information. You can have all the Mark Carney words that don't say anything, but you can't actually have the information. 13 pages. And just of records entirely blacked out. Where's the freedom of information? And we're going to talk about Bill C-2 later, where they want all your information. Are you allowed to black stuff out when they go after your stuff? Are you allowed to say, oh no, I don't want anybody to see that? Can I just black everything out before you have access to my records?
Just black out your earnings when you send your tax returns to CRA.
It's just ridiculous. And then if they want to talk about accountability and transparency, this has to stop, this blacking out stuff. Who gets to see it?
Yeah. Well, it's just protect they feel entitled, don't they, to protect themselves. And it's not like there's a groundswell of demand from the public. The public, when given the opportunity, vote for the Liberal Party by and large, don't they? So, I mean, if anything, they're rewarded for this kind of behavior.
And you and I have talked about this quite a bit. Will there be accountability with this government? And here's a Globe and Mail article that says there will be accountability, that Mark Carney doesn't put up with nonsense. But we'll see when we see the first people get fired for incompetence, because he's got a lot of people to pick from.
I can actually believe that, to be honest, for once. A hype story about Mark Carney, I think, is actually true. That's not been the case very often in the last 6 months or so, but I think he gives me that impression that he will actually fire people, which will be a bit of a change. But then you raised a very important question. Like, let's see, and also you've got a lot of people that need firing right now, like Melanie Joly, Champagne, etc.
That brings us to the Fool of the Day, and if you're one of our regular viewers, and that don't forget to pitch in your comments for the Fool of the Day. We did put Justin Trudeau into the Hall of Fame there, retired his jersey. He's going to be in the Fool of the Day section today, though. But so keep that in mind. I'm sure there's enough people to go around there to be like the low chicken. You ever heard of the low chicken thing? In a chicken coop, there's always a low chicken that's missing all its feathers. I would say there's a lot of cabinet ministers walking around there with already missing a lot of feathers. I don't know if there's a low
But
chicken.
then, he knew that. He knew that when he bought those chickens, didn't he? So that's the thing. And I think there's a big difference between the people who actually do stuff, like the civil servants and the advisors, who actually put things into play and actually accomplish tasks. There's a difference between them and the sort of face of the operation, like Melanie Joly or whatever. Like, cabinet ministers in the Westminster system, they often do nothing. You'd be surprised by how little they actually do. And obviously they're appointed for, Mark Carney committed to this 50-50 male-female thing ratio for cabinet ministers. So he immediately said, I'm not going to appoint the best people. That's not what this is about. This is about who they represent. And I think, he's appointed a lot of people who are quite obviously unqualified, but they tick certain boxes. Like they're good for the Sikh community. They're good for the Francophone community or whatever, like they tick the boxes. So they're probably not going to get fired because they're just show ponies anyway, Whereas some nerd that you've never heard of who works for the federal government, who actually does stuff, that's probably the person that will be fired.
Here's one of the more qualified guys, Tim Hodgson. He had a meeting there. Canada has the critical minerals the world needs and ready to deliver. And again, we look to where are we going to get most of those? It's going to be Western Canada and Ontario that's going to deliver that. It remains to be seen how we can get mines fast-tracked in that when, like it takes 20 years to get a mine permitted. But Tim Hodgson and Mark Carney are going to have to put the rubber's going to have to meet the road at some point here, especially with Daniel Smith losing patience there as well. But can they get mines and minerals? And that's how he says he's going to pay for some of these commitments for NATO is by accessing critical minerals and through mining.
Carney's been going on about this non-stop because obviously every time he shows his face at one of these G7 meetings or the NATO meetings, that's all he probably hears. They probably say like, when are you going to get these minerals? Because it's like that's what people look at Canada to deliver. They're not saying like, when are you going to give me that high-tech state-sponsored telecoms technology that is in Quebec or somewhere? It's like, no, that's a welfare program for the people of Quebec. Don't be silly. That's not real technology. But we do have some minerals in the ground that we might dig out.
So the clock's ticking. And when is the first mine going to be announced? When is and how do we get something permitted and in operation in a timeline a lot less than 20 years? I guess that's the real question.
Well, that bill is obviously Bill C5 is an attempt to accomplish that, isn't it? But one of the primary obstacles, for good or ill, I say this neutrally, one of the primary obstacles to getting big projects built is First Nations objections. And that was removed from the ability to override the objections of First Nations has been removed from that legislation. So it's going to mean a very, very long time in places like the Ring of Fire, the Ontario Ring of Fire. It's going to be a long time chatting to the people who claim the territory around there and trying to get them to say yes.
And here's Sean Fraser, the former housing minister, former immigration minister, now the justice minister, has promised to introduce a bill in the fall designed to strengthen bail condition in sentencing for certain crimes. Fraser said reforms are in order in the criminal justice system, particularly related to punishment for people involved in human trafficking, car theft, home invasion, and organized crime. Yeah.
This was like one of the many elements of the Liberal platform that was kind of like Tory platform light, wasn't it? Yeah. And that's precisely what this is. Tories have been going on about this for ages. Pierre Poilievre has anyway, and specifically him. And he had all these ideas, didn't he, putting people away for life and all the rest of it. And they've kind of looked at that, I think, and they've cherry-picked it, and they've liberalized it and generalized it, and then they put it in their platform. And I think that's pretty much what this is. It's just an attempt to because they are actually we're mocking them quite a lot here, as they deserve. They deserve to be mocked, the Liberals, but they're playing a pretty clever game because they've stolen a lot of the Tory ideas, but then kind of like moderated them out of existence almost. But it still looks good. This headline still looks good though, doesn't it? It's something that they can talk about, even though it's nowhere near as comprehensive as what the Tories promised.
Yeah, the sad reality is right now, when they catch people, the police, they get out on bail or not. They get out before the police can finish the paperwork.
And even when they're accused of really serious crimes as well, which is the craziest thing. When they're quite obviously, they're accused of crimes that, if they were guilty of them, would mean that they're very, very dangerous people. And yet they still get out on bail. So that's what stuns people, I think. And people, we had a few in Kelowna, didn't we, where people had been accused of, men had been accused of trying to sexually assault kids and stuff like that, and then they were just let out on bail. Like, that's how you lose the public's faith in the justice system.
Yeah, and then we got these polls, and we've seen this in the election too. We got this Nanos polling for Polyev and Abacus, and like, I mean, it's you know, like gruesome Nanos polling for Polyev, and then Abacus offers hope. Tough times continue for well, not only PR not only lost the election, but in a seat in the House of Commons, but now losing the polls in quite a dramatic fashion. But a Nanos survey released this week reckons the Liberals are 13 points ahead of the Conservatives among voters, with Polyev trailing Carney by 29 points as the preferred PM. There's a sliver of hope for the blue team, however, as an Abacus poll shows the party just 3 points behind the grid. So yeah, so take all those polls with a grain of salt.
Nanos is a bit more prestigious, I think. I mean, for whatever that counts for, than Abacus. So I think people trust Nanos a lot more. But this tweet here, that guy, Brad Zubik, he works for John Rustad, I think. So, I mean, they know very well about polling, because the polls were a bit sort of off, weren't they, when the BC Conservatives first launched onto the scene. But it is interesting. I would say, in Polyev's defense, and I'm sure this is what he's saying behind closed doors, it's like, I'm not even an MP anymore. I'm not doing much media when I'm not campaigning, whereas Carney's on TV every minute of every day with some new announcement. Right? Obviously, the polls aren't going to be very friendly to me right now. But I would imagine he's got a plan for like a relaunch once he's back in Parliament, and then we can take another look at the polls.
I did an interview yesterday with John Carpe of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and we were talking about Bill C-2 that was just introduced as well. And he said 2/3 of that bill goes into this massive attack on our long-standing privacy rights, warrantless searches for the government officials to have access without a warrant to the computers and cell phones of Canadians is very serious. So that story will be going up today on Kelowna Now. The video is available as well, the video interview. It's a good interview. I mean, it's billed as the Strong Borders Act, but inside there it's like a Trojan horse. It has a lot of other powers in there that allow police to take your cell phone, go through it without a warrant. Or, you know, usually they have to get a warrant and then go through all your stuff. But this definitely has a lot of violations of rights. Lots of people have objected to it, including all the parties, and including even the NDP is one of the most vocal in this objection to this, as well as I think there's 300 advocacy groups. And it's well worth watching. And I think that story should go up sometime today. But it's a good interview. Bill C-2.
Controversial.
What's that? Yeah, and then you put this one in here. This is a left-wing Democrat stuns former governor in New York mayor primary. So there goes former governor of New York City, Andrew Cuomo, loses out in this primary to this socialist Zoran Mamdani. I'm not very good at the words. A 33-year-old socialist, Muslim, see, a young guy too, who became an American citizen in 2018, looks to become that's a powerful job, the mayor of New York. That's a powerful job. Like, that is a huge job. Like, that's, you know, like, I think if you had like all the president and the governors, and then I think the New York City mayor would be like right in there somewhere as next in line kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a huge job. It's this has like really surprised a lot of people because, you know, New York, as anybody that knows anything about New York knows, that it has a very strong and very famous Jewish community.
Yeah. And
this chap here is not very nice about Israel, and he seems to pick out Israel for, you know, punishment. And he talks about how it's an apartheid state and it's committing genocide and all the rest of it. Just like your typical sort of fringe left-winger who will say that kind of thing while not saying a single thing about Xinjiang or Tibet or anything else, Sudan, any other sort of crisis going on around the world, because they don't know anything about that. They only care about Israel. He's one of those people. And he's also, you know, he's certainly, he's very left-wing. He's what you'd probably call like the hard left, socialist left. Almost like in the fringes of the left, talking about having like free buses and free childcare and all sorts of things, like new taxes on the wealthy. So for numerous reasons, it's quite a surprise that he would win, because, like, you know, New York considers itself to be very friendly to, you know, Jews basically and Israel, which those two things are obviously inextricably linked. So that's a surprise. It's also, you know, it's the capital city of capitalism in the world. So it's a little bit weird that a guy who's, you know, a socialist, like a third world style socialist, that he would win. But it is just a Democratic primary.
It is the primary.
This is not an election. Yeah.
And it is a promise of lots of free stuff. And that's how the NDP win here in British Columbia. And the Liberals have won in the past too as well. It's lots of free stuff promised. City-run grocery stores, like you said, free public buses, rent freezes in subsidized properties, and new taxes on the wealthy, universal childcare. I can imagine the people, yeah, it's a lot of free stuff.
But I would say, like, the richest people in New York City, or the richest people of New York City, let's say, almost certainly will live in Connecticut and New Jersey. They live outside of New York. They don't live in New York. So they'll be exempt from that. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of them are just kind of, they're probably not that bothered, a lot of them, because they'll just, you know, they'll just get their chauffeur to take them into Manhattan and then back home to Connecticut, where things are a bit more peaceful.
Both Israel and Iran are claiming victory here. This is Netanyahu say we destroyed both Iran's nuclear and ballistic missiles and also eliminated their top military commanders and nuclear scientists. Israel never had a greater friend in the White House than the president. I mean, it's it would be tough to say that. There's a clip out there that shows former presidents and even president hopefuls that said that they would have done the same thing but never did it, and that includes Obama, Clinton, Kamala Harris, and I'm talking about Hillary Clinton, not Bill Clinton. Bill's been busy doing other stuff.
I think Hillary would have done it, to be honest. I think that's a true claim.
She's a real neocon for sure. Like, she likes that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, she never saw a war she didn't want to get America involved in.
And then we also have this. This is a Reuters post there, a clip here, and this is one that the state of many people's minds when it comes to this is the former White House climate advisor McCarthy says at a Reuters event that the business community is absolutely committed to clean energy, and they're actually, you know, like losing their minds since Donald Trump has come in there and abolished a lot of the green energy programs here. Listen to her what she has to say. I think we can.
The U.S. will ever be seen again as a desired destination for clean energy investments?
Well, the interesting thing is that it still remains a significant opportunity for clean investment, both in the U.S. and internationally. And so that's the interesting thing. I think most folks really feel like we've all given up, you know, with the current administration and its interest in moving, you know, coal and oil rather than clean energy. And with the challenges we're seeing in the reconciliation bill, yeah, I think people think nothing's happening, and nothing could be further from the truth. The business community is absolutely engaged, absolutely committed. There's good reason for that from a business perspective, as clean energy really makes a lot of money. It makes huge sense. Now, the good thing from my little perspective is it also helps to keep the air clean and our water clean, which I think is very good. And so there's been lots of studies recently, Vanessa, that is looking at, so where is the business sector? And frankly, the business sector is all in. I'm not depressed about the business community. In fact, I think they are a pillar that we have to continue to build on at a time when the federal government isn't interested in doing that. And so as you may guess, I'm disappointed in the current administration, but I couldn't be more excited about the way business is handling themselves.
I have a lot more questions on business for sure, but on the U.S. government, you know, obviously the U.S. has been historically one of the main shareholders in many development banks and historically a big donor. But obviously, President Trump has reversed course on climate policies and on funding. Do you think the U.S. will ever again be seen as a reliable partner on climate initiatives? You know,
it's a depressing question that needs to be asked. And I could say that I could try to be more optimistic, but frankly, it's embarrassing. You know, I do now a lot of work internationally, with the EU in particular, working on some of the issues that they're looking at. And every time I get on the phone, the first thing I have to do is say, I'm really sorry. You know, which is a ridiculous situation for us to be.
There you go. That was a long ways to get to that apology. There you go.
It is ridiculous. She's right about that.
There you go. Any other comments on that, or just leave it there?
I just find that this is such a partisan topic for discussion that almost nobody can be trusted to take it seriously and to speak honestly about it. So I just kind of automatically assume that whatever I'm hearing about clean energy and all the rest of it is just nonsense, is false basically until proven otherwise.
Yeah, let's move on then. UK to buy fighter jets capable of carrying tactical nuclear warheads. Look at the UK stepping up there. Canada still looking at buying the jets that they were going to buy back in 2015. I wonder where that decision is. We should ring up Melanie Joly, because the last time they asked her that question, because again, let's just for everybody, we'll do this again. Harper ordered the F-35s. Trudeau was elected in 2015, and kiboshed it, said they were too expensive. And then it wasn't until 2023 that he reordered them and said, okay, yeah, we'll go with the F-35s. And then obviously he found the door, and then they waffled now again, and then Melanie Joly said they're shopping around. So are they committing to F-35s? Meanwhile, the UK is moving towards different jets. So maybe we can buy, like we bought their used submarines, we can maybe buy their F-35s at that point.
Well, these are these are ones that have been equipped to drop gravity bombs, aren't they? Like nuclear weapons because at the minute the only ones that Britain has are in submarines, because about 25 years, maybe a little bit more than 25 years ago, in the 90s at some point, I think it was 1998 actually, the Tony Blair government got rid of that technology and said, nah, we just need submarines. But obviously now, I don't know if this is just like they're trying to think like, okay, we've promised to spend all this money. Like, what the hell are we going to spend on? Again, and then they thought, oh, let's put nukes on planes.
Again, Raytheon and Lockheed are just rubbing their hands. And then the Democrats, I think it was Al Green, tried to put together a bill. Him and AOC were trying to get Donald Trump impeached for that bombing of Iran. And that failed miserably. The final vote was 344 to 79. I'm not going to play the clip, but I mean, that's pretty obvious. Like even the Democrats joined in on that and said that this is nonsense. And one of interest there, Joe Rogan had, and Joe Rogan is a fan of Bernie Sanders. And so Bernie Sanders was on there. And there's a couple of really good clips. I'm just going to play this climate change one, but he also had a clip on there where he kind of went after Joe Biden and said, well, you know, he was like saying to Bernie Sanders, like, you're pretty cognitive still. For your age, and even though Joe Biden was, a few years younger than you, and not so much. And then Bernie Sanders is just kind of, he was kind of like this. This is interesting, though. We're going to play the climate change piece here from Joe Rogan and Bernie Sanders.
You got to deal with this climate change issue, and I know that there are some people who think climate change is a hoax. It ain't a hoax. I think the last 10 years have been the warmest on record. And we can create millions of good-paying jobs transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency, to solar, to wind, and other sustainable energies.
I think the climate change issue is very complicated. And I think, did you see the Washington Post piece that they wrote where they did this long-term view? First of all, the reality is that the Earth's temperature has never been static, right? We could both agree on that. It's always been up and down. There's been ice ages and heat waves. And then the Washington Post looked at it. What was the time period that they looked at? That essentially they found that we're in a cooling period. That the Earth over the past X amount of years, and this was like a very inconvenient discovery, but they had to report the data, and kudos to them for doing that. Scientists have captured the Earth's climate change over the last 485 million years. Here's a surprising place we stand now. So look at the far end of that graph. and you see we're in a cooling period.
Well, I'm not sure. I didn't read that article, but
Yeah.
The scientists who are out there, I think.
I know, but there's a lot of money involved in that too, Bernie. That's part of the problem. There's a lot of money involved in this whole climate change emergency issue, and there's a lot of control, and that's a big part of this problem. Not only that, if we're just talking about primarily
Bernie goes from like the most important thing to basically caving there to Joe Rogan. I don't know.
I don't know if he did. I think he was just being polite because Joe Rogan had said something very stupid and ill-informed. And I feel like Bernie Sanders just didn't want to have a fight with him. Because if you actually just go and to look at that Washington Post article, that graph is 485 million years. That's what the that axis is. That's what it represents. Like, I don't think that Joe Rogan understands what that even means. But even if you look at it, if you read the article for starters, the whole article is about what a disaster it is because the Earth has never warmed up this rapidly. That's what the story is. Obviously, Joe Rogan didn't read the article, but the story is we're in deep doo-doo now because we've got this information going back 485 million years, which is like back to the beginning of complex life. And it's never heated up at this speed before in history. That's what the message is that they were trying to put forward. For some reason, Rogan obviously chose not to read the article, as I say. But if you look on the thing, you can see it going up. And also, you have to bear in mind that human beings, like our species, modern human beings, have only been around about 200,000 years. So if we're going through this, like, we've adapted to a very specific kind of climate, and so has all the other life forms around us have too. So if we're going up very rapidly, that's bad news for our species. That's bad news for the planet. And I feel like either Bernie Sanders was being polite because he didn't want to get into a fight with somebody who's so powerful, or Bernie Sanders, like many of these climate zealots, just didn't even know what he was talking about, didn't even have the most basic information. And so he just kind of like put his head down and thought, no thanks. Yeah, well, but either way, I think this reflects very badly on Joe Rogan.
I've
coming
never,
out with this tosh.
My point is that I've never seen Bernie Sanders ever just be polite. Like, he's a very animated character, and it just shows that he didn't really know when Joe Rogan just like poked that hole, and then he just kind of like said, "Oh yeah, I haven't read it." Like, I mean, he should be more adamant then.
I mean, that was my initial feeling, actually. That he didn't know. He might have just been, I don't know. He's a bit more like in this interview compared to his other Joe Rogan interview. He's a lot more compliant. He's a lot more kind of like friendly old man than he was last time. Because last time he was like lots of finger wagging and lots of like, no, Joe, it's and he was almost like impatient with him last time.
I've never seen him kind of just like bow down to anything. So there you go. Let's move
I just
on
think
to
he didn't know. Yeah, he didn't know. Joe Rogan didn't know. And so you've got one of the biggest politicians in America, the biggest media figure in America, talking about something they don't understand. And lots of morons out there going, yeah. It's kind of like, you know, when people talk about, what do they talk about? Information black holes or something like that. I can't even remember how they phrase it now. That's what that means, where you just have two completely clueless people talking about something they don't understand, and then millions of people watching it and saying, oh yeah, they know their stuff. Like, take that, Bernie.
Let's move on to BC's news and local stuff here. Another day without emergency care in Caramias. So there you go. The South Milkman Health Center in Caramias not to be able to provide emergency services from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Wednesday. The saga continues in Interior Health.
Never seems to end.
And then we do have a response here. We put up an opinion, a piece here, and this was a response from one of the local doctors in ER, responding to Susan Brown's recent op-ed that we ran on Kelowna Now. And he says, Ms. Brown refers to concerns about culture in the emergency department and refers to a behavior that is unproductive and non-alignment with the values of IH, quality, integrity, compassion, and safety. While Ms. Brown does not specifically name the emergency department as that of KGH, it's hard not to read between the line of these comments are directed toward KGH ER. We feel that they are completely unjustified. If Ms. Brown does have concerns about the quality and safety of care delivered at ER within the health authority, she knows full well that there are appropriate channels through which these should be addressed. We have a medical advisory committee, a chief of staff, and departments head to deal with such issues. Airing such concerns through the media is insulting and shows a concerning lack of leadership and professionalism. There you go, and that was signed by one of the local doctors.
That saga also continues, doesn't it? Very harsh words.
Yeah. And then there's another MLA raising some concerns of mission schools in crisis. So it seems like all we have is crisis. Mission schools now facing a $1.5 million shortfall to force cuts to classrooms. And then a little bit more from Rob Shaw. EB contorts his pipeline messaging. We talked about this earlier, how EB seems to be waffling on his pipeline messaging when he was firstly adamant. Now he's like, well, I mean, if there's somebody that comes forward, but the BC Premier blames the media for the mixed signals, and I don't know, I should look in the mirror for that one. And then Macklin
He's
McCall.
all over the place. I think he's gone through talk about crises. I think he's gone through a personal crisis. I don't think he knows what he's doing, as Donald Trump said earlier this week.
Macklin McCall, the local MLA here, he said he put out this post here, the NDP are teaching children to use hard drugs with flashcards. Why would you have flashcards? Dave Eby is hell-bent on turning BC into a drug haven. He tells us to destigmatize while experimental NDP drug policies decimate our society. And here's a little clip here from Aaron Gunn that actually showing them laying out the flashcards at a park here on Vancouver Island.
A child was attending this past Tuesday.
Always start on the lowest end and work your way up until you find your dose.
It was organized by the secondary school's Gay Straight Alliance clubs and sponsored by teacher volunteers.
It was inclusive and happy and fun and safe.
It was held at Departure Bay Park with a number of organizations having booths. Taylor was dismayed to see the AVI or AIDS Vancouver Island booth stacked with these information cards about using drugs such as meth, ecstasy, and cocaine.
This information is so marketed and so bright and so attractive that I just didn't understand at first, like what I was seeing. Why would somebody have these materials on offer with children and youth around, especially some of the most vulnerable youth in our community?
Taylor told the three adults manning the table the materials were not appropriate for school-aged children.
They were not receptive to what I was saying, and the cards stayed for the remainder of the event. They never took them down.
After the event, she raised the issue with district administration. Its superintendent issued a letter of apology yesterday.
We do take responsibility that as a district we didn't have oversight into exactly the materials that were being handed out. So we're looking at our internal processes and going forward for vetting external organizations when they come to such events.
The response from the school district was amazing.
The cards are made by an American nonprofit called Dance Safe. Avi declined an on-camera interview but says they were told it was an event for older youth and so it brought materials suitable for that age group. It regrets the mishap. The statement goes on to say it stands by the fundamental importance of youth receiving honest, factual, and appropriate substance use and sexual health materials so they can make informed decisions.
This is not harm reduction. This is the proliferation of harm. If you're literally handing out materials that describe in great detail how to do drugs to elementary school children, I mean, it's shocking.
Taylor says she doesn't believe these cards are appropriate for any community event, and she hopes going forward Avi will be much more careful in what materials it distributes.
Just the latest episode in British life in British Columbia, really, isn't it? I mean, it's just because a lot of these pretty well-organized, well-meaning idiots that don't know right from wrong have captured so many institutions across the Western world, and particularly in British Columbia, that, you know, this happens. It's going to keep happening. Another one is like the explicit sexual material as well given to kids. It's like I said, it's people that just don't know right from wrong, but mean well still, and they're in charge of this kind of thing. It's just where we are, isn't it? Unfortunately, it's the sort of level that we've degenerated to.
Yeah, and what we focus on is what we get, and here's some of what we get. April sees uptick in BC overdose deaths with 165 fatalities. Coroner service That's from the coroner service. For the first time since September, there have been more than 160 overdose deaths in a month. Again, what we focus on is what we get. And this access, like, I mean, like you said, they mean well, but if you look at the results of what's happening, and then again, this is
they mean well, but they just don't have a functional moral system. They don't. I mean, if they even have one at all, I don't. They're at sea. These people, they're completely lost. And going back to our daddy and child analogy from the NATO summit, they need a daddy, and they've not been given one. The kids are running loose. The kids are in charge of the kindergarten, and they're handing out drugs.
Harman Bangu here, the MLA. 165 more British Columbians dead in April from hard drugs. And what is EB doing? Allowing drug cards to be handed out to kids in schools. Families are being destroyed. Communities are being grieving, and this is their response. What's troubling though is that they were challenged about those cards, and they said no, they're going to keep them there. And then the school board apologizes later. Obviously, there was some uproar about it, and then they apologize. You'd think there'd be somebody there in charge that would have looked at that and said, "Whoa, that's bad."
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a stretch here from Harman to blame David Eby for this particular instance. But,
he's in charge of
I mean, I
everything.
don't think David Eby had anything to do with this. But certainly David Eby has been criticised many times, and his party for their attitude to drugs.
The drug policies. I think he's linking it to the drug policies in general, for sure. But let's move on to markets. And markets relatively kind of like, flat today after all the, the ceasefire stuff, but relatively flat today. And, Bitcoin, though, recovered very, very well after the ceasefire was announced, and some of the more risk type assets, gold had sold off and that, but Bitcoin obviously recovered well. And then this is what you have to listen to. So we're going to play a little clip here on Bitcoin back in June of 2018 here. This is from CNBC, to listen to this clip here.
This terrible price action in crypto has given us pause and forced us to ask a tough question. Should we continue to cover Bitcoin? And the answer is sadly no. So today we are having a funeral for Bitcoin. It was fun while it lasted, so many memories, so many friends. There was Tom Lee and his calls for 20,000 by year end. There was Novogratz and his calls for 40,000. And there was Ripple. I think we'll miss you most of all, Brad Garlinghouse. And then there were the Bitcoin Jesus, the Oracle of Bitcoin, all 500
That's good.
Ethereum.
All those people probably now billionaires.
Whoops, that funeral was a little too soon. And then here's a clip here, like a more recent clip. Let's play this clip here. This is yesterday, I believe.
We thought of Bitcoin as a company. Today, I think Bitcoin is 2 trillion. And we're like, well, could it get to also 4 or 5 trillion? Obviously, Bitcoin's not a company. It'd be like saying if gold's a company, but I thought it was interesting as a new asset.
Yeah, right. Market cap.
Market cap, 2 trillion is
when
so
did
big.
you get involved in Bitcoin?
I've not gotten involved with Bitcoin, and I wake up every day at 3 in the morning, and I'm like, why am I such an idiot? What have I been waiting for, not being involved in it? And it just goes up and up. In the past, I think this is interesting, the retail investors, they were much faster at getting involved with Bitcoin than the institutions.
There you go. The lesson there is the media can be wrong most of the time.
Well, not just the media, but self-described experts. Not only can they be wrong, I'm sorry to say that more often than not, they're wrong. We live in very unpredictable times. We don't live in like an easy to understand, predictable era, do we? And it doesn't matter if you're an expert or not. It's very hard to predict the future. And so a lot of these people make idiots out of themselves, don't they?
The hullabaloo there with the funeral, though, like the big burial there, really turned out to be, didn't age very well. Excuse me.
Pretty spectacular failure, isn't it?
Yeah, Bitcoin this morning, $107,000. Again, as like the war there between Israel and Iran cooled off, and then gold sold off a bit. It's marginally up this morning, $10. But the market's relatively flat as well. And then Frank, here's a big gold bug. Frank Jurista here. He had a big podcast there once with Michael Saylor. And Frank is all about gold. and Michael Saylor, obviously all about Bitcoin. They had this big argument about who would win, and then like that's two horses that race against each other. And in this year, Frank is saying that gold outshone treasuries, yen, and the Swiss franc year to date. But again, they're different assets, and gold did very well with unrest. Gold does very well with unrest. And if if there's an end to the Ukraine war and an end to all the wars, gold will likely settle a bit too, right? But China and Russia are big buyers of gold currencies, right? So,
how come yen is a safe haven? Is that just because it never moves? Basically, it's pretty static.
Yeah, and then the Japanese economy there is fairly. The yen trade is something a lot of people play actually. So, but if we look at Canada. A lot of economists a lot of the experts calling for a really rough couple of quarters. And we see that in the data. We see that in unemployment numbers. And they're saying that we could be seeing unemployment spike to 7.3%. And we see that just in our local climate here. We see companies like some going out of business and cutting back. Hiring is definitely cutting back as well, right? So the inflation rates, we talked about that yesterday. And they don't make a case for rate cuts, but the economy definitely does. And some economists are now saying that they're not expecting a rate cut in July, but I would still say that we should expect a rate cut because the economy and the unemployment numbers are pretty bad. And there's also talk in the U.S. now about the Fed cutting down there as well. So,
but I mean, as Statistics Canada shows, if you read their release on the inflation data, without the carbon tax being cut and oil falling a little bit, the inflation would actually be above target. So it's not like inflation's gone great or anything like that. It's kind of just been like manipulated a little bit by the carbon tax and the oil price. That's the story there, isn't it?
Energy is everything, and we've said that a million times. Energy is everything. And then when they lied to us and said that the carbon tax didn't add to the inflation, obviously that, from your common sense perspective, would be an absolute obvious lie to the people that could see there. But if we talk about oil today, oil is West Texas Intermediate mildly up at $65 a barrel, and then Western Canadian Select way down to $52 now, right? So. If they do a deal with Iran and there's some trade talks there, or if Trump takes off some of those sanctions on Iran and Iranian oil makes it into the market, that would probably see oil fall dramatically, and that would make a lot of the climate people lose their minds, and also a lot of people that rely on oil revenues lose their minds. But that would definitely change a lot of things, because right now China gets to buy. I think they buy 90% of Iranian oil at a steep discount, and then same thing with Russian oil. It's sold at a steep discount because, again, just like our friends here in Canada, Western Canadian Select is sold at a deep discount because we have one customer. Theirs is because of sanctions. Ours is because of our own policies. Our own policies.
Well, the Chinese have been clever, haven't they, with their oil? They get it from the two sort of pariahs, don't they? That they've decided like they're going to continue to be friends with. And the Indians also take advantage of that, where they take Russian oil and then repackage it and send it off and make a profit on it. So the clever countries do that. And America's cleverness is based on ripping off Canada, isn't it, unfortunately?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, we have our own self-imposed sanctions, self-imposed tariffs, self-imposed harm, because we didn't develop the outside markets, Mr. Eby, like the Northern Gateway Pipeline, the Eastern Pipeline, like all those things make us reliant on one customer. And then just like Iran relies on one customer, so that one customer says, this is what we're willing to pay. Would you like to sell it or not? And the same thing for Western Canadian Select. Would you like to sell it to us or not? Because where else are you going to sell it?
Exactly, yeah. So
that's the point.
Do you want to have a job or not? Do you want to make money? Do you want to be able to buy food? It's kind of like they have the whip hand over Canada, quite obviously.
And again, that's Bill C-69 and Bill C-48. And they keep saying that, there's no impediments, but there obviously is. Just look at the price. Again, the facts speak for themselves. Look at the price of Western Canadian Select. Sure, you can make up some other reasons about it being heavier crude and stuff like that, but if you look at the list of all the other crudes, some of them are worse. and yet they sell for more.
But it's also like the British sell their Brent, which they get out of the North Sea, like extremely expensive. One of the most expensive oils to extract, isn't it? And they sell it for the highest price of any oil, I think.
Sells at a premium. There you go. One of the bright spots for Canada, though, is our uranium industry, because lots of people talking about energy. And again, energy is everything. Energy is everything. That's the key words. Energy is everything. And Canada happens to be very strong in uranium, and that is Saskatchewan as well. And it's, like one of the biggest leading mines in the world is Cameco. And we also have some development mines that are close to developing. It says Denison and stuff like that. And you can see those stocks are moving upwards too, right? So there you go. And British Columbia was really famous for mining and forestry. Forestry definitely in shambles here, but British Columbia has some producing copper mines that ships copper concentrates overseas, primarily to China, feeding the Chinese, right? And then so they can build our ships for us, I guess, right? There you go. And then there's another opinion article there. I think it's in the Financial Post, actually. They must have been reading or watching our show. Repeal the EV mandate, Carney. Because Donald Trump's pullback in U.S. EV support means the markets will dry up. And then I just watched some stuff on Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors. Definitely her and Donald Trump have cozied up pretty good. And they're talking about expansions into the United States and building more factories there, less in Mexico and different places. Again, that EV mandate thing in Canada will likely kill the automobile sector, not the tariffs. It'll be the EV mandates that'll kill the automobile sector here in Canada. But there you go. Let's move on to our tech section. Technology. Intel gives up on autonomous cars. There you go. It says it's going to shut down its automotive business. Just like Apple did. Apple said that's enough of that too, right? So China not giving up on AI. China reportedly on the verge of 100 DeepSeek-like breakthroughs amid aspirations for world domination. China definitely likely going all in on AI. And what's Canada doing? Who's in charge of AI in Canada?
The ad expert. But another thing that Canada is doing is making best friends with the European Union, who, while they do have a few AI companies, aren't exactly rivals to the US or China.
So Evan Solomon and the EU can sit around and figure out how to regulate Chinese AI.
They'll figure out how to make sure that it's that it believes in equity and how it's got all the right values of this dying system.
They can phone up Xi and say, we want a meeting because we want to regulate your AI. We want to make sure. And then they can also phone Trump and tell him they want to regulate Sam Altman's OpenAI, Elon's Grok, and all those things, and just demand, just like they're doing with the digital services tax here, demand that, anyway, I'm just going to rant there. Anthropic
if you can't build it, regulate it.
Yeah, that'll work out well. Anthropic wins key U.S. ruling on AI training and authors copyright lawsuit. There's a big deal right there, right? A federal judge in San Fran ruled late on Monday that Anthropic's use of books without permission to train its AI was legal under U.S. copyright law. But they also kind of like downloaded about 700,000 bootleg copies of books, and that wasn't. So the judge said, well, that's not legal, and so they're going to figure out how that's all going to work out. So 7 million pirated books in the Central Library infringed on authors' copyrights and not fair use. So there you go.
That's not very smart.
No. And then health. Let's move on to health. And this one is obviously the most common sense thing that I've seen yet. The Washington Post article says a provision in the Republicans' massive tax and spending bill could also help Americans meet their workout goals by allowing gym memberships to be paid for with health spending accounts. Why isn't that just everywhere? Why wouldn't you let people write off their fitness things? If you want to lower the burden on our healthcare system, because the hospital is full of people with heart disease, diabetes, all caused by obesity and that kind of stuff. If you just kind of promote it, like in lots of European nations are very big on your overall health, and they regulate the food industry better, so they don't put all those dyes in everything and all that stuff. And yet, this seems like something that should be a no-brainer. And something that should have been talked about during COVID as well, but instead we had some of our doctors telling us, or public health officers telling us to stay home and have glory holes and make cheesecake and cookies.
But don't combine the two.
And then here you go, and here's some more news. A Canadian-owned MRI clinic in Buffalo says business is booming. And who's going there spending money? Canadians are going there because they can't get an MRI in Canada. Isn't that just ridiculous?
That's sickening, isn't it? I mean, that's an example of a political arrangement that is not working.
I went to a longevity conference in San Francisco and talked to a doctor, a specialist there. And I told him about one of the stories that we did, and I think I shared this before, about a young lady that has a brain tumor and said that it's 8 months to get a scan. And he said, that's a death warrant. She needs to come to the United States right now. And he said, I can get her into an MRI or a scan, or what I shouldn't say MRI, get her into a scan for $200 tomorrow. Like
dreadful.
And then also in Mexico, you can, I had a friend reach out to Mexico and that she needed a scan for cancer and was being given the runaround. She got on through a WhatsApp, and then she was talking to doctors there, and then within minutes, and then they're arranging for like turning it into a mini vacation for a scan and then a biopsy and all that stuff. And I had another friend go there for cancer treatments, and he had 6 doctors working for him. I don't know. There's something going on here. Something needs to be addressed.
The system is dysfunctional, isn't it? There's a problem with the system. But nobody wants to fix it because there are so many vested interests.
It's not like we have substandard healthcare. What we have is an overloaded system. And that's what Pierre Poilievre was talking about, how we need to cut back on the overload.
Yeah.
We have an overloaded system, and we focus on too many drugs and stuff like that instead of like focusing on fitness and stuff like that and eating better. And yeah, that's what they should be giving away in school. You know, like fitness things on how to get fit, how to participate in more sports and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to which card there looks good for drugs. I would think.
You would think that would make sense. Or, you know, instead of giving them Ozempic.
We kept our kids busy in sports. I think my daughter played, 4 sports throughout the school year. She was too busy to get involved in anything else. She's a nurse today. Fool of the day. Justin Trudeau stuck his hand up there. He says, Justin Trudeau walks into the bar and yells, free drinks for everyone. Who's buying? He's like wondering, because Canada's no longer footing the bill. I'm still waiting for his appointment. I'm still betting on that Mark Carney is going to eventually appoint him as the climate czar for the world, to go around, travel around the world and wag his finger at everybody, right?
That might be one that he saves for near the end of his term.
And then some of these Doge employees, the young kids, getting banned, like getting some blowback. He got banned from his membership in a gaming thing because of his participation. The Codex board has, this is weird, reviewed your case and permanently revoked your membership due to concerns raised by members about your activities at Doge that violate the Code of Conduct. What?
Well, violate the Code of Conduct and makes our members feel unsafe. The classic language of psychopaths. That is psychopathic language. Your existence makes me feel unsafe. You need to be admitted into an asylum. You've lost your mind.
And then he gets to hide behind this word here, Codex Facilitator, right? Isn't that nice?
And a picture of a gavel.
Yeah, the judge. And then one of the, and then the WNBA getting some attention, usually from Caitlin Clark, but Sophie, just from one headlock there, has become catapulted herself into social influencer Hall of Fame there. She's got 1 million TikTok followers just for a headlock. So there you go. All you got to do is put someone in a headlock, and you're winning. Like that Trump, when he dropped the F-bomb there the other day, that's likely going to be a meme for a while, too.
Yeah, I've already seen a good number of those to do with Taco Bell and so on.
I guarantee you that's going to be one of the biggest memes out there. Then this thing, somebody put this out here. This is a presidency in the United States, 7 years ago, and this is one of the memes. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Do you know who that was?
FDR. I can see his
I see his
silly
face
little face right now.
And
Yeah.
then it was Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And that was Ronald Reagan when they tore down the Berlin Wall. I got a piece of that wall. I bought a piece when I was in Berlin. Piece of concrete. I don't know if it was actually from the wall or not, but I was at Checkpoint Charlie. And then, and now, Donald Trump.
I just like how it's got Stephen Miller. I don't know if you spotted Stephen Miller there
in
with
the corner there,
in
yeah.
the 18th century garb.
As a scribe, I guess, right? Or what would they call them? A page
I guess
or a scribe?
he's speechwriter, yeah.
I don't know. I think that was off the cuff. I don't know if that was planned. I don't know if that was, then everybody should hire that speed. David Eby needs a little bit of that, right? Some authentic kind of like, again, what you focus on is what you get, and they have not been focusing on the economy, sad to say. And then, we're not going to play this again, but I did. Robin Rubak from the Globe and Mail put it out there. She said that she called him nuts, but occasionally genuinely funny. There you go. That was for his.
Yeah, welcome to at least 10 years ago. Like,
exactly.
It's been obvious since he first stepped into politics, and really before then, because he was famous on The Apprentice for exactly that kind of thing, wasn't he? But ever since he went into politics, that's been the main thing that I've noticed about him, frankly, is that he is funny. And wasn't it Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan said, like, he's like, because Joe Rogan's a comedian, isn't he, as well as a podcaster? And he was saying, like, you could easily be a comedian. And I think that's completely true. It's like the timing, it's the faces that he pulls.
He's an entertainer. He's an entertainer. He's absolutely, look at this. And we're going to play this post here. And then what president would ever have done this post? And we're going to play this clip here. This is, and I went and make sure that it was actually posted because lots of AI out there. But this is on his Truth Social account. But here we go.
Bum, 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 Iran.
That's good. That's good. We'll get called out for copyright there with that song.
Stealing the Beach Boys, yeah. Although it's not actually the Beach Boys, that is a cover, isn't it?
Yeah.
But because they were saying "Bomb Iran" in that song. But do you remember ages ago, John McCain was recorded on a potato doing that at a campaign event where he sang like "Bomb Iran." He did like one or two little verses, and that was like that sort of followed him around for years and years and years. And he couldn't escape that. He was being called a warmonger and all the rest of it. And then Trump just like out and out just does it, and it just like water off a duck's back, isn't it? It's like not going to follow him.
And I think part of it is the media don't like not all the media, but a lot of the media don't like Trump because he's different, because he's bombastic. He says stuff off the cuff, and it reminded me of a quote from a very famous person that's now passed from us. And this is the quote, and you can tell me who it is after. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules. They have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may be seen as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. I mean, that's pretty much him.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that certainly applies. He has definitely changed the world, hasn't he? I wonder what Steve, because that's Steve Jobs, obviously, isn't it? I wonder what Jobs would have made of Trump, actually. That would have been an interesting take.
Look, according to this, he would have hired him. And not only was this an ad for Apple, but this is one of their most powerful ads they ever ran. It became their manifesto for Apple. That's where, and it attracted some of the brightest minds out there that became, like some of the greatest minds that went to work for Apple, including the guy that just left Apple after Johnny Ives, who's one of the more brilliant. That's the rebirth of Apple, was the iPhone, and that was Johnny Ive, and now he works for Sam Altman. So big deal.
He did MacBook as well, didn't he? He kind of like redesigned their whole aesthetic.
Yeah, Johnny Ive is one of the more, and that's when Steve Jobs came back after he was fired from his own company. And this is the manifesto that became part of it. And part of the problem is that the establishment does not like the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers. They didn't like Steve Jobs at first, too, till he accomplished what he accomplished, right? And the media for the most part. Hates
It's even the same in sports as well, isn't it? Like the cocky kid that sort of is a troublemaker. Nobody really likes him until he suddenly shows that he's the best player on the team or something like that. It's and certainly you could apply this to military figures in the past as well. People like Napoleon. It's quite obvious the comparison, isn't it?
If this deal holds with Israel and Iran, and he ends up pulling some of the sanctions off of Iran, and Iran ends up participating in the global economy, I mean, that's got to go down. I mean, it'd be tough to ignore that as a big win for the United States of America.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, I don't think that that's likely, but if he did pull that off, that would be an achievement that for the last 50 years, basically, every American president at least, but also European leaders have tried and failed to do since 1979. So,
and then
it would be a big deal.
And with that said, here's a similar warning that you're giving there, and this is from the Democrats that are, like obviously very angry about it. And they say politicians warn a ceasefire is a slippery slope towards peace in the Middle East. Hillary Clinton, you're losing your mind. Do we have that one? No, we don't have it. So yeah, so the Democrats are warning that this ceasefire could actually be, tough slugging for companies like Raytheon and that.
Well, they've got a lot more customers now, haven't they? So they're happy.
And did you have this last one? Maybe not. Congratulations to CNN. This is there you go. We have this one. Congratulations to CNN, the first network with more employees than viewers. There you go, CNN. Winning.
I think we know that's false, don't we? Obviously, they don't know that because they're American. But in Canada, we know that that's false. There's another media outlet that pulled that off a long time ago.
Is that CBC?
Indeed. Who else?
There you go. There you go. That's our show for today. We hope you enjoyed it. Do we have a Fool of the Day?
For my money, I've been trying to ignore him for a long time, but I can't do it any longer. It's His Majesty, Mark Carney.
I figured you were going to go with that. I figured you were going to go with Mark Carney.
Because he can't... We shouldn't be in a situation where you go to the grocery store and exchange a few words with the person that checks your food out. They shouldn't be more articulate than our Prime Minister. That's a bad position to be in. So I feel like he's won Fool of the Day, and it's a record, I think. It's a golden prize for him today.
Yeah, that's going to become a meme, that one there. I'm sure that.
But even when he does manage, even when he succeeds and he puts like 10 words together, they don't make sense. They're just like words just like thrown together. It's like totally incongruous. Nothing about it makes sense.
But he's got a long way to go to even get close to Hall of Famer. I think we only have one person in our Hall of Fame so far, and that's Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, it was a different kind of speaking problem that he had, wasn't it?
I think we should find out what he's been up to, because the last I saw of him, he was at Canadian Tire there trying to buy some pots and pans because nobody will cook for him.
Yeah, I'm interested. I think the big reveal will when he shows off his future spouse, new spouse, second spouse. I'll be interested to see that, because that will be an interesting story.
Yeah, I'm waiting for his appointment as climate czar of the world. So there you go.
Maybe that's when he will debut his future wife, Greta Thunberg.
There you go. With that said, with Ian's most hilarious joke there, which probably not far off from the truth, but we'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Jim and Iain on The Really Big Show. And come for a laugh, come for the news, come for some interesting comments. And the government doesn't pay us anything, so we can say what we want. With that said, thank you for watching NowMedia.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence.